Recently, I finally got around to watching the phenomenal superhero show, Invincible. It took me a while to check it out, partially because of how gruesome I knew it can be. Not that I'm particularly squeamish or anything, I was just worried that the show would be more shock than substance. And I will admit, particularly in the later seasons, the amount of gore can occasionally feel a tad unnecessary. However, the story this series tells is so unique and compelling that I can almost completely forgive it for any occasional gratuity. So, what makes this story so good when so many others that similarly attempt to subvert the superhero genre with a dark twist fail? Why is The Boys a prime example of shallow, lazy deconstruction reliant on shock value, while Invincible is a refreshing new take on a tired old genre we're all too familiar with, when both may appear so similar? To answer that, we may need to look at what the idea of subversion really means and how it's used well in the right hands. But before I get into it, I'm just thinking out loud here, so if you like my brain vomit, you know where the like and subscribe buttons are. Now without further ado, let's dive into what makes for a good subversive superhero show. The word subversion has developed something of a negative connotation in recent years. This seems to have really begun with The Last Jedi, which angered Star Wars fans with its attempt to subvert audience expectations, an attempt many fans argued was successful, but not in a good way, spitting on the legacy of all that came before and undoing the central themes of the entire franchise. I might contend with some of these arguments, but they have some good points. Since then, any talk of subverting audience expectations regarding a franchise or genre, particularly in a deconstructionist way that complicates or darkens familiar stories and themes, has been widely met with revulsion from fans. That said, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with subversion or deconstruction in fiction. In fact, it's nothing new and has long been celebrated. Going back to the superhero genre, Alan Moore's Watchmen was written as a dark subversion of the patriotic superhero comics of the time, and it was and still is hailed for its mature take on what a world run by costume vigilantes and godlike beings might be like. That's what subversion done well looks like. It takes ideas, tropes, and icons we're all familiar with and changes something fundamental about them, or even simply looks at them from a completely new angle, to reveal something fresh or new about them, or to use them as a vehicle to explore new and usually darker ideas. The problem is, many subversive stories aren't smart enough to actually use their subject matter to intelligently explore new ideas. Instead, they pretentiously act like taking something we all know and love and flipping it on its head, making it as dark and mature as possible, is in itself enough to make it smart and cool. Many writers just know how to be as edgy as possible and play everything for shock value, which they seem to think somehow makes them smart. And that's what shows like The Boys do. They think they're intellectually mature because they make their content as adult as possible. To that, let me just say that adult and mature are two very different things, and some of the most adult stories are actually among the most immature. With The Boys, the story isn't enhanced by its excessive gore and sexual content because the gore and sex is the story's entire draw. The main reason most people watch the show is just to see how shockingly disturbing the next episode will be. Additionally, the writers confuse moral complexity with just making everyone total narcissistic sociopaths. Because that's what the cool stories do, right? They just tell you everyone sucks and there's no such thing as heroes? Sorry, no, there's nothing smart or cool about that kind of cynicism. I'm sick of storytellers thinking they're being innovative and intelligent by making everything they touch as grimdark as possible. Subversion, like any trope, is a tool that must be used well to enhance your story. Otherwise, it won't add anything of value on its own. In a previous video you should definitely check out, I argued that we too often see inspiring stories and complex subversive stories as opposite ends on a scale, when in reality, a story's inspirationalism and its thematic complexity are two different qualities that can be measured separately, and stories can be more than one or the other. The best are often both, and the worst are usually neither. Stories like The Boys try to be subversive simply by stripping their characters of any inspiring qualities without adding anything of substance to the story. However, stories that know how to subvert their genre effectively manage to add tremendous layers of complexity that make their story incredibly thought-provoking. And as in the case of Invincible, they sometimes manage to do so without losing what makes the stories they subvert so inspiring. In fact, it's even possible to make them even more so. Invincible takes all the tropes, all the fun, wacky elements of the superhero genre we love, and keeps them mostly intact. It's set in a world of heroes and villains mostly identical to the DC universe at first glance. It doesn't make any massive changes to the status quo of the universe or the morality of its heroes and villains, with one notable exception, of course. This is just another superhero universe where mad scientists and mutant monsters terrorize the populace every other day, while morally upright people get godlike abilities on a regular basis and dress in costumes to keep the villains in check. Magic, aliens, time travel, all part of the game that no one questions. And while the show certainly reveals its characters' flaws, it doesn't often question whether the heroes are really heroes at the end of the day. So, what even makes this show subversive? Well, first of all, it takes an incredibly honest look at what this universe would look like for the everyday people living in it, how terrifying it would be to be so helpless in a world of gods, and how horrifying the alien invasions and kaiju rampages heroes deal with on a daily basis would really be. And for the heroes, it examines the toll such a life would take on their lives and character. Mark, our protagonist, is learning to be a superhero over the course of the show, and while he initially imagines the job as the coolest thing on the planet, he's quickly traumatized at the horrors he sees and the lives he's unable to save. He's shocked with the harsh reality of what hero work is really like. In an early episode, he tries to save civilians during an alien invasion, but he just ends up hurting and even killing the people he tries to save, leaving him traumatized and racked with guilt. And this is before Season 1's horrifying final episode leaves him so deeply scarred. While it's by no means the first superhero story to do so, it also shows just how hard it is to maintain any semblance of a normal life while operating as a superhero. And unlike stories like Spider-Man 2, which try to do the same thing, Invincible denies Mark a simple, well-earned happily ever after. Finally, this show also has possibly the best exploration of the morality of killing in any superhero property. There is nothing new about people asking the question of whether superheroes are responsible for the lives they could save by killing supervillains before they can kill again themselves. It's an age-old debate that resurfaces in countless stories in the genre, and it's a morally complex topic that's not often done justice. Here, it is. Mark is an idealist who values human life. He understands that it's sometimes unavoidable, and isn't judgmental towards those who kill out of absolute necessity. But he is horrified at the thought of taking a life he could have spared, and sickened by those who claim to be doing morally dubious things in the name of a good cause. However, as the show goes on, he is pushed further and further to the breaking point. He is faced with horrors he could have prevented by taking a single life, and he is even forced to kill to save the lives of those he loves. At the same time, he sees the callous disregard for life in others that he is so terrified to see in himself, reminding him of what he could become. And as much as we know his increasingly brutal actions are necessary, we're terrified to see him slide down this slippery slope and grow so calloused, because we see his beautiful idealism slipping away, and we're constantly reminded of the monster he might well become. It's heartbreaking to watch because we know he's a good person struggling to hold on to his humanity, and we know he doesn't have a choice but to do the hard thing, or to let countless innocents die. But where's the line between doing what needs to be done and becoming a monster? Can he be who he needs to be for the world while holding on to his values and principles? Is it really possible to be the kind of hero we all aspire to be? That's the question this show asks with its subtle subversions of the superhero genre. What really makes a hero? There's a quote by one of my favorite characters in the show that has stuck with me since I heard it. You can be one of the good guys, or you can be one of the guys that save the world. You can't be both. It's a sober mantra that I hope isn't true, but the show honestly and brilliantly asks whether or not it is. That is subversion done right. The best thing about this subversion is that, unlike most subversive superhero stories, even the mostly good ones like Watchmen, it manages to be just as inspiring as the stories it subverts, if not more. Though Invincible wrestles with the profound moral implications of increasingly horrifying scenarios, and is forced to make impossibly difficult decisions, he is still a good person through it all, desperately trying to do the right thing no matter what the cost. No matter how many times he's beaten down, he keeps getting back up. He may not always be entirely sure what the right choice is, but that's not going to stop him from trying. That is a real hero, and his heroism is made all the more apparent thanks to the darkness and depravity surrounding him. After all, the darker the night gets, the brighter the light shines. That is why I love so many dark, subversive stories. Not because I love the darkness, but because the light is all the more inspiring when it shines against the darkness. We want stories that inspire us to do good, but sometimes we need to ask what it really means to do good, and how we can when the world is so consumed by evil. That is why we need stories that give us hope, while challenging us with difficult questions. Stories that show us the harsh reality of the world, while also reminding us of the good in it and urging us to fight for it, no matter what. That is why we need stories like Invincible. Thank you for joining me and sticking around this long. Sorry I've been so inconsistent with the uploads. I've been busy adulting lately. Plus, YouTube randomly decided it doesn't like my channel anymore and stopped recommending my videos like it used to. Fortunately, I'm not doing this for money, so it's not like the algorithm's threatening my livelihood or anything, but please, if you like this video at all, please share and engage with it to show YouTube your support. What do you love most about Invincible? What are your favorite stories that subvert classic tropes and genres, and how do they do it effectively? This video is just meant to kick off the conversation, so I look forward to joining you down below. Until next time, never stay silent.